Throughout the first wave of the reboot, we saw a lot of old faces return, and that was also the main selling point of this reboot. But it doesn't mean that Bushro didn't decide to drop some new units in the first wave. In fact, 2 out of 24 clans, sorry Tokarambu, were completely comprised out of new units, Bermuda Triangle and Gear Chronicle, if we don't count Mystery Flare. And today we're going to see which of these new units were the most powerful, or in some regards, the more intriguing among their peers. For this list, we obviously are going to look at completely new units. This in itself also excludes cards that changed their name because their old archetype hasn't been introduced with the reboot as of yet. I also limit the amount of cards for Gear Chronicle and Bermuda Triangle to a max 2 per clan. Otherwise, most of this list would only consist of those 2 clans. Also, don't forget, this is just my personal opinion. I might overlook 1 or 2 cards among a lot of terrible commons and rares, as most new units were pretty bad. But that's where we have the comment section for. Let's start! The Kano Automata is a very unorthodox support card for the Starhawk archetype. That archetype wants your opponent to drive check triggers, and the best way to do that is to force them to drive check more cards. But at the same time, it has some kind of failsafe in the fact that every trigger after the second drive check of the turn needs to be discarded. It is also a very nice 23k beater to help with some rearguard pressure. Besides the obvious plays, the Kano Automata has some interesting interaction against restanders and multi-drive checking Vanguard, as in those cases it's a pretty good skill as you're more likely to force them to discard a card. It's also surprisingly effective against Stride Vanguard, especially something like the new Busters, as in that case they're bound to drive check 1 or 2 triggers in their 10 to 15 drive checks. Starhawk Letterluck is another Starhawk support card, but unlike the Kano Automata, this card takes the approach a bit more direct by looking at your opponent's top card and potentially bind that card to force them to drive check triggers. But thanks to its other skill, he can also become a powerhouse of a unit. The fun part of this card comes from the fact of the mind game. Most people tend to believe that you're gonna put a trigger on top of their deck, and you can play with that expectation. You can use it before they attack with the Vanguard to get some direct results, or, and here's the fun part, use it after they attack with the Vanguard. Meaning they need to take a gamble of what their next damage check is going to be. And it's likely that they're going to guard all your tech just to draw a non-trigger for the next turn. Battledore Fighter is a solid attack most of the time thanks to its 5k power buff, but most of its value comes from its act ability, as seen as he as a Vanguard can give any unit, including himself, a new type of guard restriction, one that forces your opponent to call multiple guardians to the guardian circle if they want to guard that specific attack. Battledore Fighter on its own isn't really that powerful, but he's here on the list for what he represents. The new guard restriction. And he was the one that introduced it. And at the time people were referring to it as a pseudo Fides guard restriction. But as time progresses and we saw more and more cards with this kind of skill, people later referred it as the Battledore skill. We even saw some new expansion on this effect with the new Hero VR that increased its number to 3. So who knows how far they can go. Goddess of Insight Sotorihime is one of my favorite OTT cards in the fact that she has multiple uses written in a single card. She allows you to cycle a card and turn herself into a 15k beater, and to top it all off, she can also scry the top card of your deck. And she does this during the battle phase. We don't see this often on a mid-battle scryer skill. Because of this, we can use it not only in an offensive way, but also in a defensive way, as soon as we can stack a defensive trigger on our last attack, or potentially have insight in what our next draw is going to be. Sotorihime is one of those cards that have one ability written on the card, but has more than one function or use. These type of cards tend to be used more often than others, as they are more flexible than your average cards. They also might come back in new builds, as they can fulfill multiple roles a deck might need, what others can't. Rectangle Magus was the first rigger that not only could plus you from deck, but at the same time scry your deck to find a better piece and improve your drive checks, as her skill allowed you to check the top 2 cards from your deck, but then put them back in any order and then draw the top card of your deck. That's pretty insane, as you can have some control over what you're drawing and at the same time manipulate your next drive checks or potentially draws, as you can chain another draw skill after resolving this skill. And to top it all off, she gains extra power whenever you drive check a trigger. OTT was incredibly strong thanks to its powerful grade 3s like Amaterasu and Imperial Daughter. So what's the best course of action? Well, why not give this skill to a grade 2 and just put it on a riggered skill as well. And with that, we had a recipe for an amazing powerful card in an already very powerful clan. Hard Monopoly Anishka is one of the new grade 4s for Bermuda with the Highlander type skill, in which you need to reveal the top 10 cards of your deck, and all normal units within those 10 cards need to have different names to get some benefit. In Anishka's case, that benefit is something the likes we have never seen before. She will give you an extra force marker, protect marker, and an axle marker. Yes, you will get all 3 different variants of the give markers. Successfully resolving the skill in itself can win you games, as it is a major tempo swing, as the power output on the board is pretty insane. In this spot you can actually put any of the other legendary idol rares or the other VRs, except for Serena, as she is not really that good. The main reason why I put Anishka above the other boss units is because she alone gives you a reason to build a deck. The Melody VRs don't give you the exact same feeling. Only when you look at Sonata, Carol and Fina together as a whole do you get that same feeling. But Anishka can do that on her own. Interdimensional Dragon Knight Lost Legend is a very interesting card, as it allows you to superior write a grade 4 from your deck and at the end of the turn retire that unit and then rewrite a grade 3 from your soul. The power of this card lies in the result of resolving his skill. The grade 4s for Gear Chronicle has some insane strong on write skill, which you have access to whenever you want. You also aren't stuck on your grade 4 for the rest of the game, as you revert back to a grade 3 at the end of the turn. And on top of all of that, you gain an extra force marker because you rewritten your grade 3. Lost Legend is a very interesting mechanic that's built into a single card, as it's a pseudo-stride in standard that works with the main deck instead of the G-Zone. Also, this unit's potential is unending as long as they're gonna keep introducing more grade 4s for Gear Chronicle. At least I can't wait for what Wave 2 has in store for us. Choco Lava Heart Lieselot is a very unique card, as it's the only card that can be called as a grade 2 as well as a grade 1. This means you can call it down on turn 1 or synergize with superior call effects. But not only that, this card has the hard once per turn skill that allows you to call the top card of your deck or put that card into your soul. This card enables Bermuda to have an insane early game, as well as having a free advantage engine that could be used at any time. Lieselot's power lies not only in the fact that she's free and that she can be used right from the get-go, but also in the fact that she doesn't have any restriction. Currently she's used in a lot of decks as well as standard as in premium, and that makes her the strongest Bermuda card to come out of wave 1, because unlike the VRs and the Highlander cards that needs to be seen if they're gonna get future support, but Lieselot is most likely going to be used for years to come thanks to her splashable nature. Stealth Beast Kakashi Garas is a very powerful unit. Used in the right circumstances, it can get some insane value, as its skill not only increases his power to 26k, but he also bounces all of your opponent's units back to their hand and makes them discard 5 cards if at least one was bounced. This means if you can clear their field of all but one unit, this card can minus your opponent's hand by 4 cards. That itself is reason alone to make it a very powerful new unit, but it doesn't stop there, as in standard you can combine it with Kujiri Kongo to make some nasty guard restriction while you're at it. But in premium is where this thing really shines. You can combine it with Tsukumurokan to leave your opponent with no hands, or even with Dominate to force them to always call a unit for Kakashi Gara's skill condition. So overall, a very powerful unit. Victorious Deer was the first new unit that really impacted the game and set a tone for the new support to come. This was also the definitive reason why OTT was such a powerhouse months after the first support. Its skill allowed you to check the top 7 cards of your deck and place 2 crits among them on the top of your deck. So in most cases, you are guaranteed to drive check 1 or 2 crits for your next Vanguard attack. But if that wasn't enough, it gave your entire field a plus 10k power boost, which in itself put this card over the top. Victorious Deer is an insane card that allowed OTT to have some insane pushing power into the late game. Not only do you guarantee yourself drive checking 1 or 2 crits, it also gives all your columns a plus 20k boost in power. And because it can work as a rearguard unit, you can combine it with Imperial Daughter, which in itself is already attacking for 27k and 2 crits. You can really see what kind of implications this can have for the meta. And for that fact makes Victorious Deer, in my opinion, the most powerful new unit to come out Wave 1. And that signifies the end of this list. Wave 1 had some very interesting units, but overall not that powerful or that relevant, but when they did matter, they did that in a grandiose way. But now I'm very curious of what your favorite new additions are from Wave 1 of the reboot, as there were many more units that were introduced in Wave 1 that we didn't discuss in this video. So hit me up in the comments down below. As always, I want to thank my Patreon supporters over at Patreon for making this video possible. You guys are amazing. If you do want to support this channel, then head over to patreon.com/VanguardInsider to become a Patreon today. But with that said, I'm Mr. Time Leap, and I'll see you guys in the next one.